My husband vanished after I slept with his brother, so I hired a PI to track him down for child support. The PI found him married to a millionaire, while I discovered he legally removed my name from our house and left me homeless. I want to be clear about something before I start. I know what I did. I'm not here to explain it away or dress it up or tell you he drove me to it. I made a choice. I made it 47 times over 8 months. And I have been paying for that choice every single day for the past 2 years in ways I did not see coming and could not have predicted if I tried. I thought I was the one with the power. I thought that when Merritt left, I still had the house, the baby, and the ability to find him and make him pay. I had a lawyer. I had a PI. I had a plan. What I didn't have was any idea what Merritt had already done before he walked out the door. My name is Calla. I'm 34. I was married to Merritt for 6 years. We met when I was 26. He was 28. He worked in commercial real estate. Not selling it. Developing it. Acquiring land, building relationships with investors, managing projects from empty lot to finished building. Quiet work. Patient work. The kind that takes years to pay off and then pays off significantly all at once. I didn't understand his work when we married. I understood it better by the time he left. Because by then I understood that Merritt did everything the same way. Slow. Careful. Invisible. And then all at once. His brother is Stellan, 31. The opposite of Merritt in every visible way. Loud where Merritt was quiet. Spontaneous where Merritt was methodical. Stellan called it living. Merritt called it performing. I thought Merritt was being harsh. I thought Stellan was exciting. I was wrong about both assessments. Merritt and I had one child. Orin. He was 14 months old when Merritt left. Which means Orin was 5 months old when I started sleeping with Stellan. I want you to sit with that for a second. My son was 5 months old. Merritt was working 60-hour weeks to fund a development project that he said would set our family up for the next 20 years. And I was bored. And Stellan was there. And I made the choice I made. 8 months. 47 times. I kept count because at the time I thought the count meant something. Meant it was real. Meant it was more than a mistake. It was real. It was also the thing that cost me everything I thought I owned. Merritt found out on a Thursday. I don't know how. He never told me. He came home at 6 p.m. like normal. He made dinner. He bathed Orin. He put Orin to bed. He read him the same book he always read. The one with the bear in the river. I could hear his voice through the baby monitor. Steady. Calm. The same voice he always used. Then he came downstairs. Sat across from me at the kitchen table. Set his hands flat on the surface. And said, Calla. How long? I said, what are you talking about? He said, Stellan. How long? I said, Merritt. He said, how long? I said, 8 months. He looked at me for a long time. Then he said, is Orin mine? I said, yes. I know he is. He said, how do you know? I said, the timing. It doesn't overlap. Orin is yours. He said, I'm going to need a DNA test to confirm that. I said, Merritt, please. I'm sorry. I know. He said, I'm not interested in the apology right now. I'm interested in the truth. Is there anything else I should know? I said, no. Just Stellan. I'm sorry. I know how bad this is. I know. He stood up. He said, I'm going to sleep in the guest room tonight. I'd like you to arrange for Orin to stay with your mother this weekend so we can talk without interruption. That was it. No screaming. No throwing things. No crying. Just flat. Quiet. Like a man running a calculation in the background while his face stayed completely still. I should have known then. I didn't. I thought his calmness meant he was processing. That he would eventually be emotional. That we would fight and cry and maybe go to counseling. That's what I expected because that's what happens in every story I'd ever heard. The fighting. The counseling. The slow, painful attempt at repair. Merritt didn't do any of that. My mother took Orin that weekend. Saturday morning Merritt came downstairs with coffee. 2 cups. Set one in front of me. Sat down. Said, I've been thinking. And then he talked for 11 minutes without interruption about what was going to happen next. He said he wanted a divorce. He said he'd spoken to an attorney, already, by Saturday, 2 days after Thursday, and that the divorce would be straightforward. He said he would not fight for the house. He said he wanted a DNA test for Orin before any custody arrangement was finalized. He said he was not interested in reconciliation and he was not interested in a long conversation about why it happened. I said, "You've already talked to a lawyer." He said, "Thursday night? After you went to bed?" "Thursday night." He found out Thursday evening, put Orin to bed, ate dinner, sat across from me and asked me how long, heard the answer, waited for me to go to sleep, and then called an attorney. I said, "What about us? What about trying to work through this?" He said, "I've been thinking about that for 2 days. I've decided I don't want to work through it. Some things can be repaired. Some things can't. I know the difference." I said, "Merritt, where are you going to go?" He said, "I have some options. I'll figure it out." He left the following Tuesday. Packed 2 bags. Kissed Orin on the forehead while Orin was sleeping. I watched from the hallway. He didn't look at me when he walked out. Not cold. Not dramatic. He just walked out like a man who had already finished reading something on his own time and didn't need an audience for the exit. I called his number Wednesday. Disconnected. Thursday. Same. I called Stellan. Stellan said he didn't know where Merritt was. I believed him then. I know better now. I called Merritt's parents. His mother said, "We know about what happened. We don't know where he is. And even if we did, I don't think we'd tell you." Then she hung up. I called his work. His office number went to a recording that said Merritt boss is no longer with this company. Effective immediately. Left his job. Disconnected his phone. Left his parents in the loop. Left on a Tuesday and vanished by Wednesday. I stood in my kitchen with Orin on my hip and I thought, he'll come back. He has to come back. The house. His things. His life is here. He'll come back. He didn't come back. 3 weeks of silence. Then I did what anyone does when someone owes them something and won't answer the phone. I hired a lawyer. Miriam Sato. Family law. Sharp. Direct. The kind of woman who doesn't waste a sentence. Miriam said, "First thing we do is establish his location. We need to serve him for the divorce proceeding and we need to establish paternity before any support discussion." I said, "He knows Orin is his." I told him. Miriam said, "He asked for a DNA test. That tells me he's not taking your word for it. We do the test, we establish paternity, we move forward." I said, "And the house? I'm living here with Orin. That's stable, right? The house is in both our names." Miriam went to her computer. She pulled up county property records. She was quiet for a long time. The kind of quiet that means she's reading something she wasn't expecting. She said, "Calla, when did you say Merritt left?" I said, 4 weeks ago. The 14th. She said, "The house was transferred out of joint ownership on the 8th. 6 days before he left. 6 days before the Tuesday he packed his bags and kissed Orin's forehead. 6 days before he walked out and didn't look back." I said, "What does that mean? Transferred to who?" Miriam said, "To a limited liability company. Voss Property Holdings LLC. Registered in Delaware. The sole member of the LLC isn't listed publicly." She paused. "I'm going to need to do more research. But Calla, your name is not on this property. It hasn't been since the 8th. I said, "That's not possible. He can't just remove my name." Miriam said, "In some states, if one spouse is added to a deed after purchase and certain conditions apply to the original financing." She stopped. "How was your name added to the house?" I said, "Merritt bought the house before we got married. He added me to the deed as a wedding gift. He had it done by his attorney. I signed something." Miriam said, "Do you remember what you signed?" I said, "It was a lot of paperwork. Wedding stuff." I trusted him. Miriam said nothing for a moment. Then she said, "I'm going to need to pull all the documents. But what I'm seeing here suggests that whatever you signed when you were added to the deed may have included provisions that allowed for removal under certain conditions. If your addition to the deed was conditional rather than absolute." I said, "He planned this." Miriam said, "I can't say that yet." I said, "He planned this from the wedding. He added me to the deed in a way that let him remove me. He already knew." Miriam said, "Or he had standard protective language drafted and the circumstances triggered it. I can't tell you which one it was. But what I can tell you is that right now, legally, you do not own this house. The LLC does. And until we understand the structure of that LLC and whether the transfer was fraudulent, your housing situation is not secure." I sat in that chair in Miriam's office for a long time. I had a 14-month-old baby. I was living in a house that apparently I didn't own. My husband was gone with a disconnected phone. And I had just found out that 6 days before he left, while I was still in the same house, still sleeping down the hall, still assuming we'd have a long painful process ahead of us, He had already legally removed me from the property. While I was in the house. While I was his wife. 6 days before he left. Miriam filed an emergency motion to investigate the deed transfer. The court granted a temporary stay preventing any eviction or sale of the property while the investigation was pending. That bought me time. Months, eventually. But not a solution. Just time. We needed to find Merritt. Miriam referred me to a PI. His name was Theo Gard. 52 years old. Former financial crimes investigator. The kind of man who finds people who don't want to be found. His rate was $220 an hour. I paid it. I was desperate and the house situation had made me understand that Merritt had resources and planning I hadn't accounted for, and I needed someone who could match that. Theo took the case. He said, "Give me 3 weeks." He came back in 11 days. He sat across from me in Miriam's conference room with a folder. He set it on the table. He said, "I found him." I said, "Where?" He said, "Before I tell you, I want to prepare you for some of what's in here. Because it's not just a location." I said, "Just tell me." He opened the folder. Merritt was in Scottsdale, Arizona. He had relocated there approximately 2 weeks after leaving. He was working for a development firm called Apex Land Partners. His position was listed as Senior Development Director. His salary, based on public business filings and industry standard for the role, was estimated at $180,000 to $210,000 per year. I said, "He got a new job immediately." Theo said, "The job wasn't new." Based on LinkedIn history I was able to access through an archived version, he had been in contact with Apex Land Partners for approximately 7 months before he left. The formal offer appears to have been accepted approximately 6 weeks before he left. 6 weeks before he left. He accepted the job offer? Then the deed transfer happened 2 weeks later. Then he stayed for 4 more weeks. Went to work. Came home. Made dinner. Bathed Orin. Read The Bear in the River book. While he had a job offer in Scottsdale and a plan to remove my name from the house and leave. I said, "What else?" Theo turned a page in the folder. He said, "He married again. 8 months after your divorce was filed." I said, "The divorce wasn't finalized 8 months after he left. We hadn't even." Theo said, "He filed for divorce in Arizona? Served you by publication after multiple failed attempts at personal service. You were listed as having an unknown address in the Arizona filing. The divorce was granted in Arizona under their laws regarding absent parties." Miriam looked up sharply. She said, "That filing may not be valid depending on." Theo said, "He then married a woman named Hadley Wren. 41 years old. She is the founder and majority owner of a commercial interior design firm based in Scottsdale. Her company generates approximately $4.2 million in annual revenue. She owns her primary residence outright. No mortgage. Property assessed at $1.8 million. I said nothing for a moment. Then I said, "He married a millionaire." Theo said, "A multimillionaire. Her personal net worth based on business holdings, property, and investment accounts, I want to be clear this is an estimate, is somewhere between $6 and $9 million. Merritt. The quiet one. The patient one. The one who did everything slow and careful and invisible and then all at once. He had left. He had moved to Arizona. He had gotten a $200,000 a year job. He had married a woman worth $9 million. And he had done all of this while I was in the house we used to share, watching a baby he'd never met, hiring a PI I couldn't afford." I said, "What about the LLC? The property holding company?" Theo said, "Boss Property Holdings LLC is registered in Delaware with a registered agent service. The actual beneficial owner isn't publicly listed. But based on the address associated with formation documents and cross-referencing with Merritt's professional history, I believe he is the beneficial owner. He transferred the house to the LLC before he left. The LLC controls the property. You have no legal interest in it." I said, "Can we pierce the LLC? Can we argue fraud?" Miriam said, "We can try. The question is whether the transfer was fraudulent under the law or whether it was permissible based on the original deed language. I've been reviewing the documents you signed when you were added to the deed." She paused. "Calla. The language is very specific. You were added as a conditional co-owner. There's a clause. It's on page 4. It says that in the event of verified marital misconduct by the secondary title holder, the primary title holder retains the right to remove the secondary holder from the deed without further consideration." I said, "Marital misconduct. He had that written into the deed." Miriam said, "It appears so. The clause was part of the original deed preparation documents. You signed it. At the wedding. In the stack of paperwork. I said, he had a lawyer write a clause that let him remove me from the house if I cheated. Before we were even married. Miriam said, I can't prove that's why he included it. It may have been standard protective language. I said, 8 months of Stellan? The clause was just waiting? Miriam didn't answer. She didn't need to. I thought about the wedding. The stack of papers. Merritt's attorney smiling. Merritt in his gray suit. Me not reading anything because I trusted him. Because trusting him felt like the right thing to do when you're marrying someone. He had been planning architecture before we even said I do. The Arizona divorce filing. Miriam challenged it. She argued that the service by publication was improper because I had a known address. The Arizona court agreed on one point: the original divorce wasn't properly served. But Merritt's Arizona attorney had anticipated this. They had documentation showing that 4 separate attempts at personal service had failed. Merritt's attorney argued that after 4 failed attempts and several months, publication was appropriate. The courts went back and forth. It took 11 months total. In the end, the Arizona divorce was recognized in our state. The marriage was over. Legally. In both states. Child support. Orin's DNA test confirmed what I already knew. Merritt was the biological father. 99.97% probability. Merritt didn't contest it. He had known. He just needed the documentation. When child support was calculated, Miriam subpoenaed his income records. His salary at Apex Land Partners was $194,000 a year. Based on income and custody split, Merritt had requested and received 50-50 custody, which Miriam had tried to fight and couldn't. His monthly support obligation was $2,100. I had expected more. I had expected Merritt to be hiding money. I had expected to find accounts and assets that would push the number higher. What I found instead was that Merritt's assets were organized with the same precision as everything else he'd done. His personal accounts held normal amounts for a man of his income. Nothing suspicious. Nothing hidden that Miriam's financial investigator could locate. The $9 million in Hadley's name was Hadley's. Not Merritt's. Not community property. They had a prenuptial agreement. Hadley's attorney had made sure of that. Merritt was not going to be paying child support against a $9 million estate. He was going to be paying $2,100 a month against his own $194,000 salary. Which was fair by the legal formula. Which was also $600 less per month than I had calculated I needed to cover my expenses. The house. Miriam fought the deed transfer for 14 months. The final ruling came down on a Tuesday. The court found that the conditional deed language was valid. I had signed it. It was disclosed in the documents. The transfer to the LLC was legal. The house was not mine. I had 60 days to vacate. I want to tell you what that felt like. Standing in the kitchen where I had made dinner for 6 years. Where Orin had taken his first steps. Where Merritt had made coffee at 6 a.m. every morning without fail. Where I had made 47 choices that had started this entire chain of events. Standing in a kitchen that a judge had just told me I had to leave. I called my mother. She said, "You can stay here. You and Orin." I moved into my mother's spare room. 34 years old. 2 suitcases. A toddler. A $2,100 monthly child support check. Stellan called me during the move. He asked how I was doing. I said I was moving into my mother's house because I had lost my home. He said, "That's really hard." "I'm sorry." Then he said he'd gotten a job offer in Denver and he was probably going to take it. He asked if I thought that was a good idea. I said, "Stellan, I lost my house. I'm carrying boxes into my mother's spare bedroom. And you're calling me to ask for life advice." He said, "I just thought you'd want to know." That was the last conversation I had with Stellan. The development project Merritt had been working on for the last 2 years of our marriage. The one he said would set our family up for the next 20 years. I found out through a Business Journal article that was forwarded to me by a friend who thought I should see it. The project closed 14 months after Merritt left. A commercial mixed-use development in a growing suburb. Merritt had been the lead developer. His firm took a 12% equity stake in the finished project. The finished project sold to an investment group for $34 million. 12% of $34 million is $4.08 million. Split among the firm's partners. Merritt's share, based on his ownership percentage in the firm, was estimated by Theo, who I called one more time just to know, at approximately $1.1 million. Paid out as a bonus through the firm. Not income. A bonus. Miriam looked into whether that bonus qualified as income for child support recalculation. It did. I filed for a modification. The modification process took 8 months. By the time it was resolved, the bonus had been invested, distributed, categorized by Merritt's attorney, who had clearly anticipated the modification request. The recalculated support was $2,800 per month, $700 more than before, on a $1.1 million bonus. Because of how the bonus had been categorized and the specifics of the support formula, I got $700 more a month for 8 months of legal work. Theo's last report, the one I paid for out of the child support money I'd been saving. Merritt and Hadley have a home in Scottsdale worth $1.8 million. Merritt drives a car I've never heard of before. Hadley's firm opened a second office this year. They have a dog named something I didn't write down. They go to a farmer's market on Saturdays based on Hadley's social media. She posts photos of vegetables and her husband standing next to a table of peaches looking like a man who has slept well for 2 consecutive years. He looks the same. That's what kills me. He looks exactly the same as the man who sat across from me at the kitchen table and said, "How long?" He looks like a man who processed something difficult and moved forward without carrying it with him. I carry it. Every day. In my mother's spare room that I've painted and furnished and tried to make feel like somewhere I chose to be. With Orin, who has his father's patience and his father's eyes and his father's way of looking at you like he's running a calculation in the background while his face stays completely still. Orin goes to Scottsdale every other month. Merritt's mother told me through a text she sent by accident to my number instead of Merritt's that Orin loves the house there. That he asks to stay longer. She didn't respond when I replied. I want to be clear again. I know what I did. I made a choice, and the consequences of that choice are sitting in my mother's spare room with me, and they do not leave. They do not leave when Orin laughs, or when the child support clears, or when I have a good week at work. They sit there. Because I put them there. Merritt did not do anything illegal. Every document he signed was legal. Every transfer was authorized. Every piece of architecture he built before he left was constructed on a foundation of things I had agreed to and not read and not question, because I trusted a quiet man who did everything slow and careful and invisible. And then all at once, the pie found him. Married. Thriving. Scottsdale. Farmer's market. Peaches. The house I'm not in anymore belongs to an LLC I cannot touch. The bonus I tried to recalculate added $700 a month to my life. Stellan is in Denver. Orin asks to stay longer in Arizona. I hired the pie because I thought I had leverage. I thought finding him meant I would have power. I thought child support meant I had something. What I actually had was a signature on page 4 of a document I didn't read. And 8 months of choices I can't undo. And a kitchen I had to leave in 60 days. He didn't run. He relocated. He didn't hide. He restructured. He didn't leave me homeless out of cruelty. He left me homeless out of preparation. There is a difference. I have spent 2 years learning what that difference feels like from the inside. The spare room is quiet at night. Orin sleeps well. The child support clears on the 1st of every month without fail. Merritt has never missed a payment, never been late, never sent a message. Just a transfer. Clean. On time. Like a man who understands that what he owes is exactly what he pays and not $1 more. I thought when I hired the pie that I was hunting him down. That I was the one with forward momentum. That finding him would give me something. What the pie actually found was a photograph of what my choices built. A man with a farmer's market and a $1.8 million house and a wife whose company made $4.2 million last year. Standing next to a table of peaches. Looking like a man who was told something on a Thursday, sat with it over a weekend, made a plan, and executed it without flinching. I wanted to find him so I could tell him what he cost me. He already knew. He built the price into the architecture before we even said I do. I didn't understand that until I read page 4. I understand it now.